Hello everybody, my name is Lauren from the Student Learning Support Service. Welcome to English Language Support. Today we're talking about relative clauses. So in the previous video we talked about complex sentences, those that join a dependent and an independent clause together. We showed how they can be joined by subordinating conjunctions and relative pronouns. And now we're going to extend this to discuss different types of dependent clauses. So this video is going to discuss relative clauses, but there are two other types of clauses that we're going to go through: adverbial clauses and noun clauses. So watch the video on those if you haven't already. A relative clause is a type of dependent clause. It has a subject and a verb, but it can't stand alone as a sentence on its own. And this is because relative clauses tell us more about people and things. They're also known as adjective clauses for this reason. But in order to know more about the people or things in the sentence, we have to have a starting point. Otherwise, they just sort of float around on their own. For example, who is leaving soon doesn't quite make sense on its own, does it? I mean, who is leaving soon? Nor does which is my favorite food or which is incorrect. These all have subjects and verbs, but they don't stand alone. They are the extras in a sentence. Instead, we might say, I got a farewell card for Susan, who is leaving soon. Or we had pasta, which is my favourite food, for dinner. Or she said I was late, which is incorrect. So last week we talked about how we can link a dependent and an independent clause together with a relative pronoun. Those words like who, whom, which, whose, and that. And we can also add where and what to that list. But the relative pronoun is just the word itself. It is the pronoun. A relative clause instead is, well, the whole clause. It is that entire collection of words that describes the person, thing, or action in the sentence. So she ran away when I said hi, which I was not expecting. So here the relative clause is that entire collection of words which I was not expecting, which describes my surprise at the action of my friend running away when I was just trying to say hi. Or instead, we might say, I began the appointment by washing my hands thoroughly, which is an important professional standard for nurses. Here, the relative clause tells me more about the action of washing my hands. The relative pronoun which replaces that action. We can see this a little bit better if we separate them. So, as you can see, it stands in for the action of washing my hands. When we put these together, though, we create a new dependent clause, which is an important professional standard for nurses. You'll notice that this can't stand alone as a sentence, even though we do have a subject, which in this case is the action of washing my hands, and a verb, is. So we use a couple of these relative pronouns, who, which, and that, when we're describing different things. So we use who when we're describing people, and this would replace pronouns such as she, he, or they. We use which when we're describing things such as objects, actions, or adjectives, and we use that for both people and things. So for example, the man works down the street. He is a dentist. Putting these together, instead, I would say the man who works down the street is a dentist. In this example, the man is the subject of the sentence and the subject of the clause. I replace the pronoun he with the relative pronoun who when creating a relative clause. So let's take a look at examining that. The dog ate all the chicken. It is very naughty. Instead, I would say the dog that ate all the chicken is very naughty. When we're talking about possessives then, we use the relative pronoun whose, and this would typically replace pronouns his, hers, or theirs in a sentence. So instead of saying the man is a dentist, his dog ate all the chicken, I can say the man whose dog ate all the chicken is a dentist. I'm sure you'll agree that this is a better way to express these two sentences. But whose, unlike who and whom, is not only used to describe a person, it can also describe a thing. For example, the car whose door is jammed is being fixed on the weekend. And as you'll notice, because it's possessive, the relative pronoun whose must also be followed by a noun, whose door is jammed. Now, in the previous examples, the pronouns who, which, and that were used to replace the subject of the sentence. But relative pronouns can also be used to replace the object of the sentence. If I was to say, the people who I work with are very lazy, here I am the subject of the sentence. Who describes the people, the objects of the sentence. But in formal writing, whom is often the most appropriate relative pronoun. For example, my supervisor, whom I admire very much, suggested I make the changes. And depending on the relationship between the nouns or pronouns in the sentence, we may also need to use a preposition. And the preposition with a relative pronoun is used just as a preposition is in any other context. So, my supervisor, with whom I've published previously, proposed a new project. Whom is not the only relative pronoun that can take a preposition, but where that preposition goes changes a bit depending on which relative pronoun we're using. When it's used with whom or which, the preposition can come at the beginning or at the end of the sentence. When it's used with that, it must come at the end of the sentence. Now, there's two more relative pronouns that we haven't really spoken about yet, and those are when, which has to do with time, and where, which has to do with place. For example, your pen is on your desk where you left it. You left it there when you went to the bathroom. And as you can see in both of these cases, the time and the place are functioning just like any other relative pronoun in that they're adding that extra descriptive or adjective kind of information to our sentence. And this brings us to the question of where the comma goes. And hopefully you'll remember from the video on complex sentences that whether or not we use a comma depends on if the clause is defining or non-defining. Basically, is the information essential to understand the main clause? In the example of you left it there when you went to the bathroom, the clause is defining. I need that information, otherwise the sentence doesn't really make sense. And so this means I don't need a comma. In the case of a sentence like, Dr. Harris, who lives next door, has a big dog, the relative clause, who lives next door, is not defining. I have all of the essential information that I need about that sentence. I know who I'm talking about. I'm talking about Dr. Harris. I have identified him or her. And the really important part of this sentence is I want to communicate that they have a big dog. Whether or not they live next door is not what this sentence is really about, and I can remove that information and the sentence makes sense on its own. So using relative clauses well can really help to shape your writing. It will give you clear and efficient sentences. It will help you avoid repetition and wordiness. And importantly, it will help your reader to understand some of that really important and essential information. So let's look at these last examples. The Democratic Republic of Congo is Africa's second largest country. It used to be a Belgian colony. I can make this much more efficient and effective by saying the Democratic Republic of Congo, which used to be a Belgian colony, is Africa's second largest country. So if you do have problems with wordiness or you're struggling to make your sentences more interesting, remember that often your relative clauses can be super useful for condensing a lot of information efficiently and effectively. So where to from here? From here, make sure you look at adverbial clauses, and after that, we're going to look at noun clauses, and they make up our three important types of dependent clauses. Once we have a hold on all three of those, we're going to be able to write some really good, clear sentences. And that's it for this video. Make sure that you have a look at the associated activities if you want to extend yourself, and I will see you next time.